Government has challenged the Institute of Economic Affairs to provide credible proof of corruption at the office of the president. In an IEA Socioeconomic and Governance survey, respondents rated the office of the president second most corrupt out of 10 state institutions. But a statement issued by Communications Minister Dr. Omane Boama rejected the report, saying government has been taking far-reaching steps to address the issue of corruption. Government also says the timing of the release of this purported survey just a day before the president presents the State of the Nation address makes it even more questionable. My name is Aisha Ibrahim and this is today's big story. Today's big story is brought to you in association with Lifeline Properties, affordable, comfortable and quality housing. Now, the IEA Socioeconomic and Governance survey on a wide range of issues brought out some interesting findings. Among the findings is the fact that out of 10 state institutions, respondents rated the police service as the most corrupt, followed closely by the office of the president. Interestingly, also about 37.4% of respondents said they did not trust Ghana's tax department, followed by the Electoral Commission, the ruling NDC, the police, MMDAs, the office of the president and parliament in that order. Well, let's first hear, we'll be trying to hear from Dr. Ransford Jampo, who spoke to us earlier on the survey, but we'll also be getting him on the line to actually throw more light on this survey. But let's look more into this finding and what does it say. We're looking at the findings of the survey, which says some of the key points of the findings, which says that Ghanaians feel reasonably safe within their neighborhoods, with levels of feeling safe higher in the more rural areas. But when we go to the performance of governance, it says that 17 areas of concern were identified and views of respondents solicited as to how well or badly the current government is addressing them. And government performed poorest in keeping prices down. This was followed respectively by creating jobs, narrowing the gap between the rich and the poor, and improving the living standards of the people. Joining me online right now is Vitus Azim. He is the Executive Director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative, GII. Good evening, sir. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, good evening.
Now, the GII's Corruption Perception Index in 2014 rated Ghana as 61st out of the 175 countries within Ghana, and police service perceived as the most corrupt. Now, the IEA survey puts office of the president as second most corrupt after the police service. What does this say about corruption in our country?
Well, let me correct. The Corruption Perception Index is different from the Global Corruption Barometer. The Corruption Perception Index just comes with one index that says that Ghana scored 48 out of 100 and ranked 61 out of 175 countries. That is all that the Corruption Perception Index says. The Global Corruption Barometer is the one that now ranks the institutions and ranked police first. IEA's survey also ranked police first.
But looking at the outcome of this report, does this perception sit within your perception of corruption in Ghana?
Yeah, I think it is about the same. Well, of course, not exactly, because we did a survey, our Global Corruption Barometer, we surveyed 2,000 people, and I surveyed 1,200. Depending on the people that your sample size, how you selected the sample, a lot of things, the results cannot be exactly the same, but they point to the same direction, that certain institutions are perceived by the society to be corrupt. And unfortunately for the police, they come out first in our survey and also come out first in the IEA survey. Now, the second part, the president, office of the president. In our case, we never mention the president, office of the president. We mention political parties. And again, they are about the same. But the office of the president is made out of one party, the ruling party. Most of them belong to the ruling party. So it is also near to more or less say that it's similar. And so it points to the fact that corruption is a serious problem in the country, because these are the institutions that are supposed to ensure that state resources are better used, well used for the benefit of the majority of citizens. And if people don't have the confidence in them, if people think that they are the most corrupt, then we have a serious problem.
Well, let's look at the response that's coming from government, and I'll take just excerpts of it. The practice where, and this was signed by Dr. Mane Boama, Communications Minister, he says the practice where groups of organizations purport to conduct polls and through a visceral approach publish their outcomes in a manner that seeks to create the impression of corruption does little to advance the fight against corruption. Now, in this statement, he says the government statement, the government has been taking far-reaching steps, including reforms in the public sector. What do you make of this kind of statement?
Well, anytime that a survey report is released on corruption, the government, whichever government is in power, will always come out to deny it, and those in opposition will always come out to say, yeah, we have said that you are corrupt. This confirms that. So it is not surprising that the government is coming out to say these things. It is normal. But the point is that we need to continue to point these things out for the government to work harder to try to curb corruption. When you just say, oh, far-reaching reforms, what are they? The government needs to tell us, what are the far-reaching reforms? And one thing about fighting corruption is to make it very, very unattractive, make it an expensive venture. How many Ghanaians, high-profile Ghanaians, have been successfully prosecuted in the court for corruption? How many how many high-profile Ghanaians are in prison or in cells because of corruption? What are the far-reaching reforms that he is talking about? We need to know them so that we can challenge them. But if we just say far-reaching reforms, I don't think that's adequate.
And so the statement also makes the point that they also are taking reforms in public financial administration and the establishment of tighter controls as part of efforts to address the issue of corruption. Do you see that kind of thing happening in our country as far as corruption is concerned?
Well, when you look at the Auditor General's report, the Auditor General has on several occasions expressed his frustration at the fact that the issues that come out in the audit report are the same. They are repeated every year and nothing is done about them. The audit report implementation committees either do not exist or they are not functioning. We did a summary. Ghana Integration Initiative did a summary of the audit reports from 2009, 2010, and 2011. And it points out to the same findings come out every year and you don't see any action taken. How much money has been recovered from people as a result of the audit report?
Dr. Vitus Azim, you'd have to hang on a while.
Call me Mr. Madam.
Mr. Azim, hold on, because I have Dr. Ransford Jampo. He's from the IEA, and he would help us understand what went into the survey. Good evening, sir, and thanks for joining me.
Good evening.
Your quick reaction to government statements.
Oh, this is not unusual. It is quite typical of a government that wouldn't do an introspection and soul searching in examining and critically analyzing research findings and independent views emanating from credible civil society organizations and then also emanating from research. And so we are not quite surprised. I mean, this is what happens in Ghana. It is unfortunate. And it is also disingenuous. The practice of tagging people and calling them names instead of being receptive to objective views. And this one is not even a finding or a view of the IEA. It's a finding emanating from a survey. Okay? The states must always be differentiated from government. Government is not the state. The state is bigger than government. And sovereignty resides with the ordinary people, the popular sovereignty. And so if the people give their views in a survey, it is important that we separate those views from the view of an organization. Okay, so this is the view of the people. And so if government feels that it would want to discredit the views of the ordinary people, I mean, so be it. I think I think that's what it is.
The statement goes on to say that releasing such a report a day before the president reads the State of the Nation address is questionable. You think so?
Well, that is begging the question, and I don't know what he means. If he cares to know, in 2012 and in other periods before elections, there were surveys we conducted that we thought the timing for the release of the results were not appropriate. So we shelved those results and we just wrote papers about them. Tomorrow is not an election day. And so I don't see why we cannot release a survey result today.
So tell me exactly the method you applied in collecting this kind of data.
Well, it's quite technical, but I will do my best to explain. The survey was conducted in all 10 regions with persons aged 18 years and above as target population. Now, a stratified design that employs sampling with probability proportional to size was adopted. And the stratification was based on the regions of Ghana, and selected households and individuals for survey were randomly sampled from pre-selected primary sample units. Now, a total sample size of 1,200 households was selected to allow for up to 20% non-response. Now, basically what we are saying is that if you take a look at the 2010 population and housing census, it gives you an indication of the number of people resident in all the regions. So if you go to the Ashanti region, for instance, it's 19%. And so if we have a sample size of 1,200, we give 19% out of the 1,200 to the Ashanti region. If the population housing census shows that the Bronx Ahafo region, for instance, has 8% of the population, and so we also give. Hello.
Yes, I'm here with you.
Okay, there's a feedback. Hello.
Dr. Jampo, I'm here with you. I think we lost Mr. Vitus Azim on the line, but we're still on air.
Yeah, so that was what we did. So if Bronx Ahafo had 8% of the total population as per the 2010 population housing census, we give them the 8% out of our 1,200 sample size. Now, if you get this number, then we went to the region and did a household random sampling, and then we interviewed the respondents. So basically, I mean, to break it down in the common language, that's what.
So you have drawn a number of recommendations. Based on what did you draw those recommendations?
Hello, can you repeat that question? I didn't hear.
I'm saying that you've drawn a number of recommendations, and based on what did you put down those recommendations?
But the recommendations, I mean, this question I don't understand. The recommendations emanate from the findings of the survey. I mean, how do you conduct a survey and do recommendations that are not in tune or in sync with the findings? The recommendations are based on the findings of the survey.
Well, many thanks to you, Dr. Ransford Jampo. Earlier on, we spoke with Ransford Jampo. He took us through what the nitty-gritties of the survey. Let's take a listen to what he told us earlier on.
Well, if it's quite serious, that's what the public says. I mean, as the Director of Research indicated, this is not IEA position. It is a survey that reflects the views of the ordinary people we try to sample. And so if the people are saying that that office is the second most corrupt institutions, I mean, that is what they are saying. That's not what I'm saying. That is what the ordinary people are saying. And so it is important for some of these institutions that have been implicated to do more to shed that kind of negative perception that they have, and corrupt perception that they have, from the people. Well, the political implication of this perception is that our democracy becomes seriously under threat. I indicated earlier on when I was talking to one of your colleagues that poverty and corruption, if not checked, would supplant democracy. And so it is important that if we have all decided that democracy is a way to go, then we do all we can to tackle poverty, we do all we can to also minimize corruption. Because if you don't take time, people would begin to take the laws into their own hands and do whatever they want to do in a manner that would undermine our democratic gains and our efforts towards democratic maturity. So it's important that some of these, why should you feel that, well, if you struggle to get there at that particular office, you would be free and then you would be rich sooner? If people have this kind of idea and impression, then those who are unable to get there feel disadvantaged, and so they will do all they can to get there. And that's why elections also become a do or die affair, because he who gets there, will be seen to be having ATM machine on his veranda. You can always have access to public resources, and it shouldn't be the case. So it is important that we do all to tackle some of these challenges. Our effort to consolidate our democratic gains will come to naught if we do not put in much effort to tackle corruption and poverty.
So that was Ransford Jampo, Dr. Ransford Jampo. He's a senior research fellow at the IEA. Let's now shift to other areas of this survey. And I have online David Agbe. He's executive director of Ghana Institute of Governance and Security. And I also have joining me Mr. Kofi Bentil. He is with Imani Ghana. Both of them will engage me in this topic. But I start with, good evening, gentlemen, and thanks for joining me.
Good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Let me start with David Agbe. What is your reaction to some of the findings in this report?
For the opportunity. I think that the findings of this report is quite revealing in that at least it gives us a certain impression as to how Ghanaians, see the way the government is running the economy. And they've also expressed their view with regards to what government needs to do. And so for me, it is a very good report for government officials to take it upon themselves and try to work on it. Although one must say that every research, one needs to establish the fact that we have a very clear objectivity. If the objectives of establishing all these findings are good, government needs to find a way of addressing it. And we also need to make it very strong that every research that needs to be conducted, we need to be able to control the people. So if people have been well controlled and they come out with a certain findings which we believe and trust that it is very genuine, government needs to take it upon itself and work accordingly such that Ghanaians will have a trust in the government. So that is our perspective on it. And if you look at the report so far, I think that it is a very good piece for everybody to get a copy and to be able to read it and also, come out with his own opinion.
Okay, David, hang on a bit and let me speak with Mr. Kofi Bentil from Imani. Good evening, sir. The issue of corruption and the perception keeps coming up in surveys. Now, government is rejecting the findings which rated the office of the president as second most corrupt. Do you think the findings are unfair and perhaps government has a basis to challenge the report's credibility?
Good evening. We all have to have a sense of perspective when we deal with these things. Upon what basis is government saying this is, not a report that they have to take seriously? And what is the basis also for the persons who did the research to come up with what they came up with? Anybody who understands basic statistics knows that there are rules for conducting a research. Anybody can go on the street and just take a sample of the first 10 people that they meet and then ask them questions and then draw a conclusion. That will not be good enough. But when you have a reputable institution which has a track record for doing certain things and has put out the methodology by which they did it, and they have done the proper sampling and done the things that you properly must do to be able to determine that, oh, this is the general view on this and this issue, it is not in anybody's prerogative to come and say, I refuse or I will not, respect this or whatever. Okay? They have done their work. They have put out a report. What you can do is attack the methodology. Okay? In any case, nobody also has a responsibility to accept it per se. But my point is this. The greatest potential beneficiary of a report like this is government itself. That is, if they'll take the lessons from there and then maybe amend their ways. If they choose to rubbish it, it's their prerogative. Ultimately, we all pay for the decisions that we make. For me, I am not looking at, whose ox is God or who is put in a good or a bad light. It is important for the governance of this country that we have an idea of how the governed feel. It is important that we do some of these things to test the, effect of some of the decisions that we make. And if civil society organizations, out of their own volition, do some of these things, it is not for government to just rubbish it and say, well, we don't care what you say. We're just going to go on and do what we want to do. I don't think it's good for the governance of this country. So I think the right thing to do is to question the basis for this report and not just rubbish it or even just accept it.
Okay, let's speak with David Agbe, and let's take the issue of factors which influence voters in presidential elections. The report says a whooping 79.1% of respondents said political party program of action and ideology is a determinant of their preference. Does this surprise you?
No, I've always, expressed such a comment that in this country, I disagree with people who might suggest that people do not vote based on ideology. Then you do not understand politics, and you do not understand Ghanaians' ways of, voting. Because the foundation of this country, right from Kwame Nkrumah, Kwame Nkrumah was an ideology. And so that ideology remains with people who belong to the post of Kwame Nkrumah's ideological inclinations. And when you take the NDC too, they have a certain ideology. NPP equally have a certain ideology. So if you have all these dominant parties in your country, you cannot say that Ghanaians do not vote based on ideology. And so for me, this respect, say it all, such that Ghanaians will start to indoctrinate their people that political party needs to have an identity, and your identity or philosophy must be able to influence a certain people all over the world. Any political party which does not have an ideology, you are a political party just on the surface. You cannot, work. You cannot be able to influence voters the more. So for me, or for us, we believe that this research is quite revealing, and we will continue to encourage other organizations and Ghanaians in general to buy into a political party's philosophy and ideology. And that is the foundation of politics. So it is very good that they come out with this information such that 79.1 Ghanaians vote based on ideology. I think it is
Well, many thanks to you, David Agbe. That was quite detailed. But Mr. Bento, if you're still on the line, the report also said about a fifth of respondents consider unemployment to be the most critical problem. I know you didn't conduct the survey, but seriously, do you think the issue of unemployment is such a big deal? Is the problem unemployment or underemployment?
Well, unemployment, underemployment, it's a serious matter when people don't have work to do. As far as they are concerned on the micro or, personal level, it is their biggest problem. But as a policy person, I'm looking at the bigger question. Unemployment is one of the major problems we have in this country, but it is more a symptom. It is the cost that it is caused by the general economic woes that we are going through. Things like the energy crisis, things like, the city collapsing, and some of those things which make it difficult to produce in this country are the reasons why we have unemployment. So at a personal level, the person will feel this is the worst problem I have. But indeed, at a policy or a macro level, it is more about the causes of these things. So I would understand it in those, senses. And if you ask me what weight to put on it, I'll say it's a very bad problem, but I would seek to deal with the macroeconomic issues, which ultimately would affect things like unemployment. That being said, I think that the policy measures to try and deal with unemployment, like JIDA and now the YEA, are a bad idea, a patently bad idea. I think that without this result or with this this work itself, government already has made its decisions about topically treating unemployment using things like JIDA, and it's sad. It's sad because of the experiences we've had in the past and the fact that there are no guarantees that we are not going to continue to have these experiences in the future if we continue to do the same things. So unemployment may be serious, people may wail about it, but again, that is why you have leadership and you have followership. Leaders must be able to disaggregate the issue and determine what is a cause and what is an effect, and then prescribe the proper measures which will deal with them instead of just reacting and setting up funds like JIDA, which ultimately end up wasted and stolen.
So, Mr. Bento, if you were in government, what exactly would be your reaction to this kind of report?
If I were in government, the sensible thing I would do is to take a very hard look at it. And I would read the methodology and understand how they came by these, results. And if I am comfortable with the kinds of results that they have come up with, I would seriously study them and put my people together to see how we can resolve the worst portions of this kind of a survey. But that being said, if the government is up and doing, it should know these things before civil society organizations like IEA come up with things, like this. So I should have already known. That also means that if this is a surprise to government, then indeed it reflects the kinds of incompetence we have in the area of governance and decision making. Because if you don't have these pieces of information, then upon what are you making policy?
So are you
saying
if I am
government, I'll study it very closely and I'll take it seriously.
Are you saying that government policies have been up to scratch?
No, government policies have not been up to scratch. A policy is in essence a strategy. A strategy is something you do to deal with a problem. Strategies can be assessed in three ways: before the strategy, during the strategy, and after the strategy. The most surest or the surest way of assessing a strategy is after it has been implemented. The fact on the ground today is that after 6 years of NDC and 3 years or so of President Mahama, almost everything they've done has failed. So you can tell by virtue of the outcomes that this government has not been able to come up with good strategy, and they make mistakes upon mistakes upon mistakes. That is why we are in the present predicament we are in. Energy crisis, everything seems to be going on in this particular country. So it is easy for you to say that the policy making in this country has not been up to scratch. The evidence is there for all of us to see. It is not difficult at all to make that determination.
Well, Mr. Kofi Bento, thank you very much. He's the Vice President of Imani Ghana. We'll be back shortly with the interactive segment.